grateful to be here. I just want to give it up to MamaGanuush, my drag child, and also a genius who dances really well. Also, for Cassidy LeBlanc, my drag consultant, who's doing this beautiful makeup this morning. This dress, and also my partner, who helped me make my speech sound English, and then put this music together for you with me. I'm also very grateful for Chaplain Bonnie and Chaplain John, and for the entire community who brought me here, and for you for showing up today. I have a keynote for you today, but before I do this, I just want to offer you, Zach, my partner here, we have a little, what do you call it? Index cards, yes. And then in the pens, if you'd like to ask any questions, so it's easy for you. I also want to provide some trigger warnings. I am Palestinian. It comes with a lot of trigger warnings. So if you are needed a space, if you needed to soothe yourself, if anything I said was upsetting to you, feel free to do anything that's comfortable. If you'd like to leave, don't worry about it. I won't be offended. I'll be very relieved. And I'll be checking on you after I finish my keynote. It's awkward to step out. And then, yeah, I mean, we're ready whenever you're ready. Okay. So I want to just, given that I'll be talking about Indigenous folks today, I want to take a minute to honor the Olonis, the Indigenous tribe of this land that's now called San Francisco. So thank you for having us in your space. We respect you and we love you and we'll always remember you. Sorry, there's so much logistics you don't do when you prepare for this. I'm so sorry. That's so dramatic. Okay. So today I aspire just to bring some hope to everyone who can relate to my story and a sense of compassion in our community. We have so much going on lately, and it's just time for us to reconnect and talk to each other. So my story is really our story here. There's so much of us that are very similar. My existence is an act of resistance is what I'm talking about today. We will unpack what that means and also why it's relevant to you all. And if we mention resistance, we have to talk about transformation. Transformation comes from your religious beliefs, relapses that you go through, and remissions. And this is how you find yourself back. And this is what spirituality is for me. We're going to talk more about this. I inherited my father's story and my mom's. My dad was one of 11 children. My mom was one of 12. Palestinians had a lot of children. They were part of a Palestinian and African heritage. My Palestinian lineage just goes back centuries in this land. My dad was born in Jaffa in Palestine in 1932, and my mom was born in Al-Lid in 1947. My dad lost his father as an infant, and he grew up in the care of his uncles, my uncles, his brothers, Muhammad and Nasser. Muhammad loved to play the flute. He went to school in a neighborhood called Al-Nuzha. This is where my father grew up in Palestine, in Jaffa. And Nasser was born with limited mobility. I think he has what we would call now autism and Down syndrome. Muhammad made a wheelchair for Nasser. He took his siblings out to see the movies at Al-Hamra cinema. That was a big deal in Jaffa. My father used to remember when King Farouk and the royal family come to visit in Palestine to spend their summer vacations and go to Al-Hamra cinema. They also had really big Egyptian blockbusters. That was like the golden era of Egyptian cinema, or the start of it. My dad always talked about how Al-Hamra was an iconic movie place. At that time, Jaffa was a thriving Palestinian city and had a major financial and banking system post-British colonization. It has also a dense population of 100,000 Palestinians at least, that are mostly Christians and Muslims, and a minority of Jewish settlers who moved after 1917, I'm sorry. His eldest sister, Fatma, was a beauty. My father would describe her with black hair. She had hazel eyes, and she has rose cheeks like my father would say in his accent, Dorsti l'amor. who was a very famous Hollywood star at that time. And then that was like, Fatma was a total rebel. She wanted to go to med school. She wanted to go to Beirut. She wanted to be the first doctor in her family. At that time, that was like a big deal in like the 40s. In May 1948, my uncle Muhammad took Nasser and Fatma and my dad to watch The Three Musketeers. That was like the big blockbuster at that time in Jaffa, but they never made it. The Stern Gang, it's a Zionist terrorist organization and an early foundation of the Israeli army, sacked Jaffa. Muhammad and Nasser were lined up against the wall and shot. Fatma was raped and killed. Al-Hamra movie theater was burned to the ground almost like the same day. There's so much shame in my family about rape. Like my family does not talk about an aunt who was raped. There's so much talk about this, but I really want to tell her story today. This is just honoring her and honoring her life. My dad was able to escape the rest of his family. They walked the days to Aramle. My grandmother had a brother who lives there. This is another Palestinian city, and they hide in a old Palestinian church. The Stern Gang and the British Army bombed the church. My father's cousins were all lost. There was 3 of them in the age of 12, 14, and 10. They had to run away on foot to Gaza. It's a trip that took them a few days just because of the safety. It's like a 60-mile trip, but it took a lot of time. And they settled in Relapse. Relapse is a Palestinian refugee camp for people that came from Jaffa in 1948 and settled in Gaza Strip. My family and my whatever left in Palestine right now still lives in this refugee camp since 1948, almost 3 generations. My father was forced to become a patriarch of his family. He abandoned school. At 16, he was working 3 jobs to take care of his, I can't remember, 6 at this point, of his siblings. My mom was born in 1947, just a year prior to the Palestinian genocide, which we call a Nakba. Her father was a train conductor in Al-Lid. Al-Lid was also another Palestinian railway hub where the Brits and the Turks had a very major railway system at that time. And it was a dense Palestinian city, also with a mostly population of almost only Muslims and Christian Palestinians that are native to the land. That city was north of Gaza. And in 1948, the Israeli militia raped and paraded Palestinian women in trucks around town and shot all boys older to 9 years old in Deir Yassin. It's a very known genocide for the Palestinians, one of the earliest for the Palestinian people. It's a village that's close to Jerusalem. The news spread around. My grandpa was terrified. He has daughters, he had kids, so he fled to Gaza for safety and he abandoned his job. In 1966, prior to the second Palestinian genocide and the colonization of Gaza Strip, my mom married my dad. My dad was a PTSD survivor. It's a post-traumatic stress disorder, if you think about today's standards, and struggled immensely with mental health. My mom realized what she got into, and she had no interest in continuing this marriage. Her dad agreed to support her divorce, which was a big deal. Women don't get divorced in the Middle East even now, like imagine in the 60s, and to return back to college in Egypt. But that never happened. Her father and her uncle were biking home after Al-Fajr prayer, which is the morning prayer. In 1967, they were caught by Israeli sacking forces and they were tortured to death. They were in their 50s. Their skulls smashed with Israeli weapons. They were not able to identify them. Their bodies left on the streets for 6 days until the Israeli ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians of Gaza slowed down because it never stopped. And in what Israeli proudly called the 6-Day War or the Yom Kippur War, they're very proud of their genocide. Sometimes I wonder what my mom's and my dad's life would be if their families were not losing everything. I inherited my parents' suffering based on my lived experience and epigenetics. I mean, Agatha, correct me if I'm wrong, she's like a scientist, a PhD in epigenetics, and one of the things that she does. But based on this, I really inherited a messed up DNA and a lived experience. It's really altered my entire experience and my being. But this is not only my story. This is the story of 13.4 million Palestinians who live around the world right now and continue to survive the Israeli colonization and ethnic cleansing. 4.5 million Palestinians live in Gaza Strip and the West Bank. These indigenous Palestinians have been surviving inhumane conditions, increasingly restricted resources, and life inside the largest open-air prison in modern history. This is bigger, of almost the same size of the Nazi Germany concentration camps. The Israeli army announced ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in Gaza. The Minister of Defense a few days ago called indigenous Palestinian human animals, subhumans, something his ancestors were labeled by Nazis over 70 years ago. A familiar story of colonization, a false narrative about Palestinian savagery, similar to Africans, Aboriginals, Filipinos, Latin Americans, Chinese, Vietnamese, and other nations that continue to struggle under the US and European imperialism. American and European imperialism referred to indigenous lawful armed resistance as terrorism, while describing the American, European, and Israeli ethnic cleansing of natives as justified retaliation. Yes, we are subhumans in the eyes of Israel. I am a subhuman in the eyes of Israel. Yes, we're subhumans also in the eyes of the United States government, which gives the Israeli state nearly $4 billion a year and a further $8 billion less than a week ago, and it blesses our genocide. Even Biden was retweeting false narrative about Palestinians killing children, and finally had the courage to apologize for it discreetly. I was meant to believe at birth that I'm subhuman. In the past 3 days, my mother's family in Gaza witnessed the death of 3 generations. Entire families were wiped out. The total death count of my extended family is 159 subhumans, mostly mother and children, subhumans, as Israelis would call us. I don't believe I am subhuman. I'm a first-generation Palestinian genocide survivor. And I'm here to prove that I'm a human being and I deserve to strive and have dreams. I am here to tell you that 13.9 million Palestinians deserve the decency of recognition, reparation, and right to hold arms and protect themselves from their colonizers. Americans romanticize the state of Israel as an extension of the biblical story of the kingdoms of Israel, especially evangelical and a lot of Protestant beliefs in this country. The current state of Israel itself is not a biblical dream. It's an ethno-state. An ethno-state that means it's a racist entity that only allows people recognition based on specific ethnicity, that has been illegally colonizing indigenous Palestinians' land since 1948. Again, the current state of Israel is not your biblical romanticized story. It is an ethno-state, a racist state, and an extremist organization that actually founded it. Indigenous Palestinians lived in peace for centuries until they were colonized in 1948 with the help of the British Army and the European Zionist extremist militia that became the Israeli army. I invite you to shake off the evangelical colonialist narrative and think critically for yourselves. My existence is an act of resistance. My family was forced to find safety in Egypt after the second Palestinian genocide by the state of Israel in 1967. And I will keep repeating this because a lot of you know, but a lot of others don't. This is where I learned about history, philosophy, and politics, but I also learned about the place in the Sunni Muslim tradition that I grew up in. I learned that I don't exist. Me being queer is a test from God. I guess it sounds very relative to a lot of people from different faiths. The expectation of Allah are to suppress and fix my sexual identity, otherwise it's eternal hell. And that sounds really familiar too. As far as I remember, I pray to Allah every night to wake up straight. I wake up every morning with the intention to be a good Muslim. Can you imagine the dysphoria and the chronic fear of being who you are? At the age of 14, I started gay conversion therapy. For 12 years, the Egyptian doctors prescribed highly sedative medications to suppress my homoerotic desires. Without diagnosis or necessities, I was on bipolar meds, epilepsy meds, and Xanax. They treated my sexuality as a personality disorder and my homoerotic desires as mania. This is still the truth of young queers in conservative communities in this country and in other organizations and other places, including Egypt. And so my existence as a queer person in Egypt was an act of resistance. I decided to transform my reality. I rebelled. I screamed to the face of Egyptian institutions. I supported the voices of oppressed women against forced pregnancy. I called out the systematic abuse and the constitutional lies against queer folks at a very young age. But I was considered subhuman, a stateless refugee, a faggot. I'm sorry. I escaped prosecution and found my way to San Francisco. I thought it was safe here, but I was faced with microaggressions, racism, and ignorance. In the midst of these pains and atrocities, I met a Palestinian American woman who was born in Jaffa in 1944. She ran the refugee support program at the Tenderloin Outpatient Clinic. Her name is Nabila. She's a living truth of Palestinian American experience. A Harvard librarian, a social worker, a community leader, an activist, a linguist professor, a stage 4 cancer survivor are a few aspects of who she is. As my partner would say, nothing in the world can break Nabila. A resilient, intellectual, supportive survivor of all forms of Israeli and American abuse. Nabila helped hundreds of refugees of all ethnicities, including myself. Another person showed up, a Southern belle, who survived the AIDS epidemic in San Francisco. His name is Chris Kumater, or as I refer to him as Coco. He housed me, he loved me, he taught me how to park 6 shifts in San Francisco on steep hills. He helped me get my first car. He became my first chosen family. Then more and more appeared, including others here, whether they are queer or allies, like Dina and her gorgeous husband and son, that I'm breaking all the trigger warnings. I'm so sorry. I was. This is the corset. I'm okay. My existence is an act of resistance. I was diagnosed with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis a few years ago. It's an autoimmune disease that attacks your nervous system. It presents itself as chronic fatigue for me, sensitivity to light, and chronic pain on my left side. It is disabling, incurable, and I live with constant fear of paralysis, blindness, or death. Every day is an act of resistance for me. Everything from waking up, working, daily chores, sleeping, having sex with my partner, or even just watching TV. It's a pain at all times. Not the sex part. It really hurts and it's extremely lonely. What makes it more difficult is my inability to protect myself. I have been abused sexually, verbally, and physically while having multiple sclerosis, and it's tough to stand up for yourself. I also endured racism in medical institutions, with white nurses shouting at me or assuming that my pain tolerance is higher because my skin is deeper, or I mean darker. I wasn't surprised. This is the US medical system. They invented eugenics and they exported it to the Nazi Germany. My continued existence as a person with disabilities is an act of resistance. Being told by Israel, by this country, by most of the global north, by God, that I am subhuman, I decided to stop existing. At the age of 7, 16, and 27, I tried unsuccessfully to end my life. Although I don't have any intention to try that again, sometimes I feel extremely helpless. I feel alone, and I feel I don't exist. In gay standards, I am 0 out of 10. If you're not muscular enough, kinky enough, lean enough, fat enough, smooth enough, hairy enough, or white, period, you don't exist. I thought in San Francisco gay community I would be paradise for me. Well, it's not. I had people in gay bars rope me in drag, dismiss my humanity, and treat me like a piece of subhuman, a human hand. I see the lack of support and acknowledgement of Armenians who are being ethnically cleansed as we speak with the support of Israel and US weaponry. I also realize my Black identity is now a threat to my safety. I see the abuse and discriminations against the Black and Brown communities all over this country. So no, this is not a place that is safe for me. It's not a place that is safe for a lot of us. It might be for Brian with a wife from Connecticut, but not for me. But by continuing to be visible, authentic, and proud of my community, I look extremely fabulous. My existence is an act of resistance. It's tough to survive without spirituality. Unfortunately, my spirituality was tied up with oppressive religious ideology. The act of critical thinking, according not all Islam, but the type of Islam I grew up with, means abandoning God and listening to the devil's manipulations. So I abandoned my spirituality and religion altogether. Until one day I saw a drag queen lip syncing Wild as the Wind by Nina Simone. That's my favorite song from Miss Nina. My heart was extremely joyful. I sang with her in ecstasy. I found God. I forgot how I look. I looked really bad. Uh, where I was. And I realized I just had a very strong spiritual experience with Miss Nina Simone and that drag queen. That song was a calling, and that drag queen was a prophet for me at this moment. And I mean, until now. The drag show felt like Friday prayers for me. So I went back again and again. Years later, Casa de Blanc, the one who just gave me some release in my corset, offered me an opportunity to perform at my first drag number at her show, Tricks and Tracks. Very messy medley for a very messy virgin. Performance of Loving You for it's like a hippie anthem at Tricks and Tracks. When Casa de Blanc painted my face for the first time, I cried. I felt full body orgasm. I understood what does it feel to have gender euphoria. I felt whole. I felt very, very good about my body for the first time. My pain disappeared. I was on stage. I fell a few times. The lights and the stage were just everything I needed. It was my tiny chapel. I was born again, drag queen. I was born again, human. And I found my spirit in resistance. Drag also helped me find my people. All these trans and queer folks and allies, a lot of them are here today or online or protesting for Palestine at the Ferry Building. I realized I just needed to be recognized. I realized I just needed community. I felt for the first time mirrored. I felt celebrated, and I did not feel alone again. I built a community day by day of folks who are queer and allies. With the support, we started House Ganuush. That's my drag house. I married a Midwestern, Catholic raised, adorable sweetheart, a wholesome man from Wisconsin who has a very strong accent, who loves me, and he sits right beside me, and he worships me, and he worships my body, he worships myself. We have a pit bull. It's very cute. Her name is Rue. We called her Rue, not RuPaul. We were worried about RuPaul getting canceled, so we called her Rue. Such a queer thing to do with dogs. It's a pit bull, of course. Yes. We organized Vocal AF. It's an open mic. We built a place to cultivate community at Queer Arts Featured. Before my multiple sclerosis became very disabling, I also built a career in tech. I am an unhoused Black Palestinian who made it to a marketing executive at companies like Airbnb and Google. It was a way of surviving the rent. Also as a marketing executive, you're like third class citizen. From the fear of being assaulted, I'm proud. From the fear of being assaulted on the streets to having a home with the person I love, a family that despises my sexuality to a family that loves me, including adorable Egyptians and people who are very heterosexual, very gorgeous that are sitting here. And two nephews that I really care for and I care about. I stand here in front of you because I believe in my right to exist, and I have people that supported me. That's my religion that transformed my relapses into remissions. A religion is your system of your belief, it's not your oppressors. Remember this. Religion is your system of belief, it's not the oppressors. I just wanted to take a moment I could breathe with my corset also, that would be wonderful. And repeat with me. I deserve to exist. I deserve to be recognized. And I reserve unconditional love.
Unconditional love.
And I deserve unconditional love.
Unconditional love.
And don't wear double corsets. I invite you all to remember when you're walking the street or you're seeing a Palestinian person on the news, a trans person walking down the street, a drag queen with a beat-up makeup after a very long night, maybe self-conscious of being called out on her makeup, an in-house person with somebody struggling or mental illness. Open yourself to them, welcome them in, be kind and treat them as your own, treat them as humans. I also remind you of your responsibility to ask your politicians about where they are spending your tax dollars and standing up for oppression and colonization in all its forms. And remember, when you're a member of an oppressed group, your existence is your resistance. And again, if you're a member of any oppressed group, and I see a lot of you here, your existence is an act of resistance. Thank you so much.